and then come in and you expect it, you have some food to, they offer food, tea, and if you put your head off and put on the ground, that means, please, I would like to stay overnight here.
And I imagine this tradition grew up because people were living long distances away from each other, and it was hoped that there would be a sort of reciprocity of this kind of kindness.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. People live far from each other, so when guest arrives, it's always really respected guest. They will offer you, tea, some food, and you have a chat about the world.
And as Mongolia urbanizes, as more people move into cities and settled communities, have you seen these traditions surviving, or are they dying out?
I would say we still have this tradition. I mean, you can't really knock any door in an apartment building and say, hi, it's just wouldn't be the same. But you'll be offered tea at least, for sure.
For these nomads, life in Mongolia's wide open spaces continues for now. But their numbers are dwindling all the time. The long road through the steppe finally leads us here, to the Mongolian capital, Ulaanbaatar. In the last 5 or 10 years, UB, as the Mongolians call it, has changed almost beyond recognition. Wealth from the rapidly expanding mining sector is fueling an economic and population boom here. But the traditional does still have a place in the new Mongolia. As we arrive in the city centre, 999 children are gathering to perform in a traditional horsehair violin orchestra to celebrate the holidays.
It's incredible as you walk around. Everywhere there is building work, but what strikes you is this real sense of pride in Mongolian history. It's almost as though it's a sort of bulwark against the rush towards the modern world. And everyone I talk to says, this is what we want to hang on to. We want to hang on to our past, and we want to celebrate what went before, but in a context of modernization, of moving forward, of joining the modern international world.
These are the children of democratic Mongolia, all born after the overthrow of communism here in 1990. As their current leadership would have it, theirs is an independent Mongolia, emerging from the shadows of its giant neighbours, China and Russia. A country Mongolia's founder, Chinggis Khan, would be proud of. And it's the money flowing into this city from the country's mining deposits that's bankrolling change. Just on the edge of the same square is the epitome of the new Ulaanbaatar, a complex of designer shops serving Mongolia's rich. As Jargal showed me around, I wanted to know more about this country's new label-conscious class.
So Jargal, we're in this brand new complex, about 12 or so designer shops. Who's spending the money here? Is it indigenous Mongolians or is it tourists? Who's got the cash?
I would say Mongolians.
Right.
I would say majority are Mongolians.
But to your typical wealthy Mongolian, is it important to have, to be carrying a Burberry raincoat?
Louis Vuitton bag must, I guess.
Oh really? That's
yes.
the it item, is it?
Yes.
Okay. And what is it? What do they feel it says about them?
That they're wealthy.
Yeah? They're westernized?
Yeah. A lot of people travel abroad, and if before Mongolians were, traveling abroad for shopping, now they can do it in Mongolia.
The complex is welcoming plenty of new customers through its doors, including an unlikely one we met outside.
Ooh.
Yes, he's a monk.
He bought purse, turufch, shoes. What do you have in also I got a coat from there too.
Great. And where would you wear your new clothes?
In everyday life I would wear them.
What do you think of the prices though? A little bit expensive, right?
이거 전압자일 준비가 돼 있대.
Quality things cost, you know?
okay,
Quality is
yeah.
맛있겠다.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Mongolia's boom clearly has plenty of winners, but the expansion of the capital isn't the uncomplicated success story it might appear. 60% of Ulaanbaatar's residents live here, in the so-called Gir districts, and the majority of them are nomads who've left Mongolia's wilderness behind for a new life in the city.
So this is what mass migration physically looks like. If you see the gears behind me, this is what people bring with them from the countryside. They'll ask somebody who's been here a bit longer whether they can camp out in their back gardens, if you like. And as they become more established, they'll start claiming a bit of land and they'll fence it off. And as they become wealthier, they'll start building brick houses for themselves, and so it goes on. The interesting thing is that there's no planning permission for any of this. It's all illegal. So in theory, they could be moved on at any time. But looking around, it's clear that no one here has any intention of going anywhere.
While it's the promise of opportunity that's attracted residents here, the reality is different. More than half live below the poverty line, and the vast majority don't have access to sanitation or running water. To find out more, I met Toya, an unemployed single mother who moved to the city to try to improve life for her kids.
So Toya, why did you move from the countryside to the city?
In the countryside, I had a few livestock. I had an income. But when my youngest daughter got seriously ill, I couldn't find treatment. So I had to move to the city to get better health care for her and for better education too. If it hadn't been for that, I could have stayed there quite happily.
Toya's family, like many Gir district residents, is caught between two worlds. One in the countryside, lacking opportunity, and one in the city, lacking community.
Everything in the city is about money. If you don't have enough money or a job, it's very hard here. I think my children will have a better future and they can help me have a better life.
What strikes me most about Toya's story is very simple, really, that it's the story of the thousands of people that have moved from the countryside here into the Gir district. Life is undoubtedly tough. There's no running water, work is hard to find, and for what she's saying, it's actually very lonely. But she wants what everybody else here wants, which is a better future for her children. And that she feels she's going to get through education. So however hard it is, she's determined to stay and determined to make something of this situation for herself and for her kids.
The Gir districts are also where Mongolia's Olympic hero Bedrogan grew up. Boxing was his passport to a better life, and he's not the only one for whom sport could be a way out. Munkbat Chinadorch is pinning his hopes on the power of football. He's a coach and mentor to a group of kids living in the Gir districts. His players are among Ulaanbaatar's newest residents, recent arrivals from the countryside. He set up the club so they'd have something to strive for.
If they were not playing football, I believe they would probably be out in the streets, hanging out with the wrong type of people. This is a crucial stage in their lives. It is hard to control the kids who move to the city from the countryside. They are used to being out running around, but on the streets of the city, there are many more dangers like traffic and drunk people.
Like any good coach, it's the potential, not the problems, that Munkbat sees in his players.
This is my real goal, that these kids can have a better life. Some people wrongly believe that these kids are trouble, that they behave badly. But I find them to be kind, easier to deal with in a way. When it comes to sport, they are stronger, they have more courage.
Back on the football pitch, that's not something I think Munkbat will be saying about me anytime soon.
Yes! They just couldn't have done it without me, obviously.
Change is something this generation of Mongolians knows better than most. The country around them is transforming fast. Munkbat is hoping the fulfillment they can get from sport will help these kids find their place in the new Mongolia. My journey across Mongolia has revealed a fascinating country, rapidly growing and quickly changing. Naadam is a festival like no other on earth, virtually unchanged for 8 centuries, save for the presence of four-wheel drives. It's a cultural and sporting bedrock in a land where history and tradition still matter. But the Mongolia I've found is also embracing change. Galvanized by success in the Olympics, this country is opening up economically and growing in confidence politically. The dividends of growth aren't spread evenly. Mongolia faces plenty of problems. But if character has anything to do with it, from what I've seen, Mongolians have what it takes to overcome those obstacles. On the edge of Ulaanbaatar is the Zaysan Memorial. Built to commemorate the help Mongolia gave Russia in World War II, it's a great vantage point to watch as the weather of the city shifts dramatically. It's a final chance to ponder the country I've discovered on my journey here.
In many senses, modern Mongolia has come of age. 21 years of democracy, and this country is confidently on the move. Be it the weather, people, sports or politics, this country is going forward. No doubt there are big challenges ahead, but the fact is people here relish competition, and sportsmen like Bedrogan prove that they can take on the world and win.